if you were sentenced to death, and then they came to you and said, or you can go to El Salvador, which would you choose?
I'd go to El Salvador. Well, it depends.
I'm saying
what's
death.
the choice? Is it go to a mega super prison in El Salvador?
Dude,
be
these
beaten
El
and
Salvador
tortured?
prisons strike me as cruel and unusual punishment for U.S. citizens. I think if you're the worst of the worst in our country, you're better off getting capital punishment. I want to give you capital punishment here before I'm sending you off to some El Salvadorian prison with 50 beds in one room and you're going to live there for the rest of your life. I'd rather not send. I feel like that runs.
This is what
said. The justice system gets it wrong all the time. It politically persecutes people, and they put people in jail incorrectly all the time here, even with due process. So to then say we're going to ship these people off to this kind of prison with these kinds of savages is, I think, beyond the pale.
How bad
I
of a
agree.
margin of error does it need to be? Is it just one person?
One person.
One person will
person.
make
For
it.
me.
bad
One
enough?
person.
Okay, so
Yeah, I'd always rather err on the side of letting 100.
unfortunately, I don't think we'd be able to get anything done in our country
Don't
if
worry,
we didn't.
we are nowhere close to that line. Like that's my line, but we are nowhere close to it. We get.
Sure. I mean, I feel
We're
like it
nowhere
almost
close to
projects
getting
onto
anything
the.
done.
I feel like it almost projects onto the earlier story about sending the gangsters, the Tren de Aragua gangsters, back to El Salvador, because it's like worst case scenario, they wrongfully sent an illegal migrant back, but 99+% of the people who they did deport to this El Salvadorian prison were Tren de Aragua gangsters. And if that means we have to occasionally send one or two illegal migrants incorrectly there too, or we can't send any to begin with, you won't be able to get any policy done, because in our country we will always get policy. It's always going to fail
I feel like
at some point.
I do think that people who are here illegally should have due process in the habeas corpus. My line is not as stringent for them. If you get deported in this country for being here illegally and you are given due process and are found to be guilty, and let's say you're innocent and you get deported, that's no longer really our fault. That burden's not on us, because
but there's a
you
margin
still
of
made the
error
choice.
even in due process, isn't there? Even if they do go through all of the courts.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that my line is more for citizens when I say that we should not be.
But I also think she's saying that the line is for due process, right? When you say, like, how many people is too many, if one person is wrongly sent to a gulag, it's cruel and unusual punishment. That's a violation of the 8th Amendment. That's why I say no to Trump doing
But even if we have due process, people will still be wrongfully convicted.
Indeed, but they'll go to American prisons with the right of appeal and certain safeguards and protections and human rights protections.
We shouldn't be offshoring our prison and crime problem in our country. Again, if Trump's talking about the worst of the worst, we should bring back some capital punishment and clear some regulation about having to inject them oddly. But
I think that liberalism, libertarianism is largely what we would refer to as liberalism, but the terms have been, bastardized over a long period of time. Classical liberalism today is basically modern libertarians. I think this is a cute concept that really only exists in times of peace, because as much as the founding fathers very much entertained Enlightenment principles and classical liberalism, that didn't mean nothing when the Revolutionary War started.
Oh, yeah. Ben Franklin spoke as if they were at peace his entire life. He acted as if it had already worked out, and that was his. That's how I try to live in a lot of ways, and it looks stupid in the middle of the heat because you're like, yo, bro, put the fires out. But
And
I'm
I
like,
think
well, when the fires are out, things are going to be.
I think the important thing to understand is that the Revolutionary War wasn't declared. British troops came to Massachusetts and said, turn over your guns. And the men at Lexington and Concord said, yeah, right. We're not listening to you.
Dude.
And nobody knows who fired the first shot, they say, but the war started. And it wasn't until 13 months later they signed the Declaration of Independence. They didn't want war. War happened. And so people have this in similar things for basically every war. People act like war is a thing where two sides look at each other and they're like, we're going to fight, aren't we? All right. All in favor of war? Charge.
Dude,
When in
think about
reality,
World War I.
something happens.
Right? Nobody thought that the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was going to bring the entire world into the most bloody conflict in human history.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
didn't even know why they were
my
fighting.
point ultimately is this. When you argue things like, we can't do this because the executive has too much authority, I'd like to just imagine a scenario where you have two factions vying for control of a single system. One side says, by any means necessary, and that's a quote. The other side says, we can't because it would be wrong. Which side wins?
I mean, traditionally throughout history, of course, the evil people win. I think America has stood out because we did. And yes, you're right. Like, did we compromise our principles at times? Did the founders sell out? As soon as one of them became president, did they abandon many of the things that they'd said? Yes, of course.
Sedition
Power
laws.
corrupts people. Absolutely. But what has made America different is that we have had a higher set of ideals that we have tried to live up to and that we have gotten closer to over time. And I think my concern right now is that on the right, that's being abandoned, and not even just abandoned, but mocked. You know, it's silly for trying to
I reject that, actually. I think it was abandoned by the Democrats first, and the right's reacting.
Well, I don't think the Democrats were ever holding themselves to those ideals, right? It's always been the conservative ideology, libertarian conservatism, that was striving towards those end goals.
I completely disagree.
You really think the left
George
was
W.
striving?
Bush in Iraq and Afghanistan?
I'm talking long before that. But you think the left has ever been striving? I mean, under what administration was the left ever striving for these things?
Right now, I said Democrat, right? So obviously the left is a bunch of crackpot lunatics. The Democratic Party so the Republicans and the Democrats have largely been a uniparty marching in lockstep with the D.C. legal machine funding their fake politicians. Donald Trump wasn't supposed to win, and then he did, and now you've got a populist uprising. Bernie Sanders wasn't supposed to win, and they stopped him.
Don't you think that's just to clarify, you're talking about like post-World War II, right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, post-World War II, the liberal economic order basically just took the world over.
Okay.
They said, we won the Great War, we have jurisdiction over anything, and they built the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, Bank of International Settlements, the SWIFT payment system. As
Israel.
Ian knows quite a bit about. And these are things by which they can put nations in debt to then say, it's effectively like, kneel before me and I will make you rich. And some countries say no. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.